Hello and welcome to the Swan Week of Wellness presentation. Today I am here to talk with you about how to talk to your kids about race and racism. So my name is Pastor Kaitlin Pabo-Eulberg. I am the pastor at Epiphany Lutheran Episcopal Church, as well as the Mission Integration Manager at Providence Valdez Medical Center. And I am here with the ever-esteemed Molly Walker, who's our Youth Services Librarian here at Valdez Public Library.
Hello, friends. Welcome.
And we are here to talk to you about how to talk to your kids about race.
Yes.
So, why, when we're talking about wellness, why would we talk about how to talk to your kids about race? So particularly, we know in our news streams, we are quite aware that our country is focusing in on systemic racism, particularly after the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. And we're hearing about protesters in the street as adults, but our children are also hearing about this too. And so they are reacting to the ways we are reacting to news in our own homes. And so this is the time for us to explore, not just as parents, but as educators, as leaders in our community, so that we can have wellness when we talk about racism in our classrooms, in our dinner tables, at our churches, and in our workplaces. So I've heard especially from parents that they really want to educate their children about how to be anti-racist, but they're not really sure where to start. And so here we are to help you and to help wonder together with you about how we can talk about race. But before we continue on, both of us wanted to give you a disclaimer. So we are two white women that are talking about race and racism, and we highlight this issue not because it's just an issue for people of color, Black people, or Indigenous people, but knowing that people who are white are also part of the issue, and we need to educate ourselves and each other about the impacts of racism, as well as lift up powerful stories of people of color, especially knowing that our town of Valdez in our current census is 87% white. So this is our work to do together.
Right. Thank you, Kaitlin. So it is really never too early to talk to your children about race and racism. From a very young age, children are noticing the differences they see in people and are noticing how we as adults react to it. A lot of times, Black families will reference having to talk with their children about how to have interactions with people and interactions with police so that they can come out of it alive. There are even children's books to help parents, Black parents, have these talks with their children. So it is a very real thing. And so we should all be having talks with our children about race and racism, and not just the evils of racism, but also the immense joy and the accomplishments of people of color. So in that vein, we're going to do a short reading because I am a children's librarian, so reading books is what I do best. So we are going to do a short reading from the book, The Day You Begin, written by Jacqueline Woodson. There will be times when you walk into a room and there is no one quite like you. Maybe it will be your skin, your clothes, or the curl of your hair. There will be times when the climbing bars are too high, the run is too fast and far, the game isn't one you can ever really play. I don't want him on our team. You can watch. Maybe you can have a turn later. There will be times when the world feels like a place that you're standing all the way outside of. And all that stands beside you is your own brave self, steady as steel and ready, even though you don't yet know what you're ready for. There will be times when you walk into a room and there is no one quite like you until the day you begin. to share your stories. My name is Angelina, and I spent the whole summer with my little sister, you tell the class, your voice stronger than it was a minute ago. Reading books and telling stories, and even though we were right on our block, it was like we got to go everywhere. Your name is like my sister's, Rigoberto says. Her name is Angelina too. And all at once, in the room where no one else is quite like you, the world opens itself up a little wider to make space for you. This is the day you begin to find the places inside your laughter and your lunches, your books, your travel, and your stories, where every new friend has something a little like you, and something else so fabulously not quite like you at all. So that is a wonderful book to kind of highlight the differences between children and between all of us really, and how wonderful those differences can be and that they should be celebrated.
Thank you so much for sharing that one.
Absolutely, that is one of my favorites.
It's a beautiful illustration, and you can rent it from the library, right? You can borrow
yes,
it?
all of these books that I'm sharing with you today can be checked out at the library. And if you need any kind of assistance in getting those books, let me know.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, absolutely.
So the bulk of our presentation will include us going through each of the developmental stages for children, all the way from birth to adulthood. And we want to share resources as well as activities. So we will go ahead and get started. And we'll start first with how we can do anti-racism with children ages 0 to 2. Mm-hmm. So, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, as early as 6 months old, babies' brains can detect racial differences. And so it's really important to lift up different things in the midst.
Exactly. And believe it or not, there are books that kind of discuss racism for babies. And so this is a really wonderful book called Anti-Racist Baby. And so it has these really beautiful illustrations and different steps. And one of them is open your eyes to all skin colors. Use your words to talk about race. And so it's a really great way, even though obviously if you're sharing it with a 6-month-old, they may not fully it is a great way to kind of start kind of having those conversations. So with each book I share, I'm going to share one that talks about, talking with your kids about racism, and then other books that just kind of celebrate different experiences. And so this is called Love Makes a Family. And this is just a very beautiful board book, very simple illustrations with just diverse characters and diverse families. And so I think it's very important to share those as well. And as important as it is to talk about racism, also talking about the joy and accomplishments of people of color as well. Great. So what is the activity for birth to?
Similarly to what Molly talks about with having books that lift up diverse cultures, make an effort to learn about diverse cultures yourself and then tell those stories with your children. Of course, a 6-month-old might not be able to formally grasp what you're talking about, a diverse culture, but you're already introducing them to difference and saying difference is not only just okay, it's actually appreciated and important for our world. So play and sing songs that have different, highlight different cultures as well as languages than your own. And you can also read books that include languages and cultures that are different than your own. And I particularly wanted to highlight an awesome group that lifts up children to sing and rap. It's called Alphabet Rockers. If you could check out their video called Stand Up For You, they highlight and lift up children to be able to talk about difference, not just for racism, but around gender and sexual identity. And it's really powerful to be able to sing those and be empowered.
Absolutely. I love that.
So then after, in the midst of toddlers, we have preschool kids. And that is
Yes.
when children are recognizing internal and internalized racial biases for those around them for 2 to 4. So we can recognize that there are white children who experience racial bias by the age of 4, as well as inversely, people of color have felt discriminated against as young as 4 years old.
So this is a really wonderful, pretty new book called A Kid's Book About Racism. And this does a great job. This book is really meant to be read by parents and children together. And this is actually great for kind of a variety of ages, anywhere from down to like preschool age up until kind of like early elementary even. And it does a great job of talking about differences and how those are not meant to be viewed as bad things, but then also talking about the experiences of people who do experience racism as well. So it's very simple, kind of explains racism, just very simple words and illustrations. So it's very helpful. And so that is a great resource to use. And then also just a fun book celebrating differences. This is called Jabari Jumps. And this is about a young boy named Jabari and him overcoming his fear of jumping off the diving board. And it's just a very lovely story about overcoming fears. And he's at the water park with his dad and little sister. And so it's just a lovely book about a family doing fun things together. So, yes.
And then for an activity, I would invite you to tell stories about your own heritage with your child and explain that people have different unique ways of living. So for instance, you could cook a meal from a different culture and talk about people from that culture and how they understand the world. And I know some families here in Valdez, they order those awesome snack boxes from around the world. And so I wonder about highlighting that country and doing some research together about how the culture enjoys these snacks, as well as how they understand life. And just, again, highlighting difference can be really profound and appreciated.
Absolutely.
So next, we have our elementary school kiddos. And
Yes.
By the end of elementary, most children are set in beliefs surrounding race by age 12. And particularly, I wanted to highlight from ages like 6 to 8, children at this age are developmentally very focused on fairness. And it's an excellent time to talk about justice because they see when things are not right, especially if
very good point.
Their fair share. So you can ask directly how children feel about certain issues because they're starting to realize what is fair, what is right, what's wrong. And you can have open discussions with your children surrounding race and racism, and especially encourage them to be able to ask questions with you.
Absolutely.
And later in elementary school, so this is probably like 5th and 6th grade, youth in this developmental stage are apt to start doing their own learning without a parent or an educator. So they would be getting more information from technology without an adult's clear guidance. So when they have clear, concise questions about what worries them or what they're hearing in the news, it can be really helpful to bring out some of those things they're thinking about because they're learning without a mentor or an adult trusted person. It's helpful to ask them very direct questions. So did you know that happened this week? What do you think about that? What have you been seeing on social media? What is worrying you right now? And so we can't often count on children to bring up things that are bothering them because they might not know that they have the opportunity to ask the questions. So it's important to ask them the direct questions.
Absolutely.
And what's reading?
Yes. So for, like I said earlier, for kind of the early elementary, A Kid's Book About Racism is still a wonderful resource for that age group. And then this is a great picture book for kind of that early elementary stage, Where's Rodney? It's about a young boy who just wants to play outside. And it's great because it kind of shows a little bit of trouble in the classroom, kind of paying attention. And then he gets outside and he just thrives. It's a really beautiful story, especially because we don't have a lot of books highlighting people of color in the outdoors. So this is a wonderful representation. And also, there's a few different of these Little Leaders series. This particular one is Bold Women in Black History, and this is a great resource for celebrating the accomplishments of Black people throughout history as well. And then during this time also, this is a really wonderful book about Alaska Native history and kind of some of the atrocities that were perpetrated against them. This one in particular is about the boarding schools. So it's also very important to share about that as well. And a lovely book about harvesting in Alaska. So yes, so a great resource to kind of also then highlight the beautiful cultures we have here. And then as far as upper elementary and discussing racism, let's talk about race. This is a small book with a big punch that does really well discussing racism with that and fairness with that age group. And a couple books for upper elementary, Ghost Boys discusses police brutality and in a really powerful way. And then just highlighting different cultures. Tristan Strong punches a hole in the sky. This is great for fans of Percy Jackson. It's kind of a great way to kind of learn about different legends, and it has a great main character in Tristan Strong, so highly recommended.
And then ask for an activity
yes.
to work through with your elementary school kiddos. I wanted to highlight an activity that is called Why Does This Keep Happening? That was created by Dr. Erin Winkler of she's an associate professor of the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. And it invites a child as well as a trusted adult to take a piece of string, and then you're going to have them wrap it around themselves. So, and you could imagine some different things that make it harder. So as they're wrapping it around, say, a Native child is told by their teacher that they're not smart enough. And then an Alaska Native little boy is made fun of by his friends for looking different than them. And then they need to go to the food bank because they can't afford to pay their bills. So they use food bank assistance. And you can just keep having them wrap it around. You could even have them wrap around their hands. And then you ask, why is this so hard? Why is it so hard to get rid of this? So when we talk about fairness with kids, they can say, oh, we'll just pull off that one thing, it'll be fine. But this activity really highlights all of the ways that it makes it really difficult to get out of a system, something that is a structure in place that makes it hard for people to be well and to have good opportunities. And this really helps kids understand that it's not an individual act of racism, but rather a system that makes it harder for people to thrive. So it's all tangled around us, and it's around us too as white people. So how do we get out of here? How do we do this? It takes a little while. So you could give them solutions to be able to take it off. So reading diverse things. Oh, I'm going to get myself so tangled. Reading diverse books, talking about it, having trusted people. Oh my gosh, we can do things. So you can help them talk about the issues as well as the solutions that we can do together. And then we have lastly our teens. And so this is where it's really important to keep the conversation going. And as parents and educators of teens, you can know that's kind of difficult. But it's important, particularly for teens, to be honest about your own bias and your own struggles. Discuss what they're seeing in the news or what they witness at school. And particularly, teens are trying to figure out their own sense of identity and values separate from their parents or mentors in their lives. And this is where extremist views can develop, because if people are leaning in on mostly internet resources, you're not sure what information they're getting. And so if you have your child say something that sounds really extremist and you're not even sure where it came from, it's really important to say, that's not actually how I see it at all. What brings you to believe that? Or can you explain to me more why you believe what you believe? Because we know that extremist views can grow and thrive when we don't talk about things. So it's really important to also just mention, that's not what I see. And I'm a little nervous about that, actually. And that can really create a good conversation and a dialogue in which change can happen.
Absolutely. So at this age group, it is, they're, like Kaitlin said, they're getting resources and information from everywhere. So it's great to maybe even see if you can maybe read the same thing and have a discussion about that amongst your family or amongst friends. So a great start with that is Just Mercy. And this particular book was adapted for younger readers. So it's a much, it's kind of a little more accessible. And so this discusses, really gets into systemic racism and the injustices of the American justice system, really. So this is a great starting point as well. And then as for fiction, The Hate U Give, a very popular one. This also discusses police brutality in a very open and honest way. So I think it's as important as it is to read nonfiction and true stories. I think a lot of times we see ourselves most in fiction. So I think it's also important to share those stories as well. And then a book about joy, With the Fire on High. This is a lovely story about a young woman in high school and just all the things in her life she is juggling. And it is a beautiful story about her support system and the things she goes through. So yes, very important to balance the books about struggle also with books about joy as well.
I have so many new things I want to read now.
Yeah. Story of my life.
So for activity for teens, something that I think can really be a great model for teens to see how they can be part of solutions is volunteering. So ask your child or your teen, where do they want to go help the community? And then go with them. So you can volunteer at a local nonprofit so that they can see that they can be a part of the solution to the issues that they're coming up against. And you can also talk about the connections. So if you volunteer at the Valdez Food Bank, you can talk about the connections that food scarcity has with systemic racism. So another one, Valdez Adventure Alliance, you can talk about how nature can be really inaccessible, not for us, it's bountiful here for us, but for someone who lives in an urban area, not as bountiful. And there's also the Advocates for the Victims of Violence. So you could have them go and take a tour and help out in any way. And you can also talk about how violence and abuse happen a lot with people of color and Indigenous peoples. And then you also have the Valdez Senior Center. You could go and volunteer there and meet some seniors, and then they could see the importance of caring for all ages of people. And just knowing that this is all intersecting together. So it's really great for people to see all of the ways that they can help and be a part of the good.
Yes, absolutely. So this is a lot of information that we have kind of brought forth. So I think it's always great to end on tangible things that you can do. So coming from my perspective, I think it's so important to share kind of some of the books I've shared today, but to share and celebrate the voices of people of color in all of the media that you consume as a family, whether it be books or movies or TV shows or music, and watching those things and using those things to learn, but also using them to celebrate these cultures and these differences. It's also important when you are seeking out those different forms of media to look for, in the library world, we call them own voices. But that's really just to say books, media that are written by the people who have lived experiences of the characters in the books. And so, for example, Tristan Strong punches a hole in the sky. There's probably not anyone who has ever punched a hole in the sky like Tristan, but it is written by Kwame I mispronounced it, Mbalia. And so this is a great book about just different cultures and different stories. And so it is written by a Black man. So it is important when you're seeking out these books about diverse characters that the authors and the showrunners and the musicians are also diverse as well. Looking at the books and the movies and the music on your shelves and seeing how many of them are written by authors of color or are star actors of color, and just looking at those things and finding ways how we can promote those more within our households as well. And finally, some really great resources as you're kind of starting your journey to finding those great voices. The Conscious Kid, that is a wonderful website, and they're also on various forms of social media that always shares and uplifts different voices, as does the Brown Bookshelf. That's another great one. And then there's a new series on Netflix. It's also on YouTube, and it's called Bookmarks. And it features primarily Black celebrities sharing books, own voices books. And I believe one of them is even Let's Talk About Race. So it is that's another wonderful resource to watch with your kids as well.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then when I think about what I would hope for folks to feel like they can do this, that our educators, our pastors, our parents, our grandparents can have these conversations with our youth about race and racism, I think it's just really important to start with yourself first. So look at your own bias. Children pay attention to adult behaviors. More than anything you say, they're paying attention to what you do. So if you talk constantly about treating everyone with fairness to your child, but then you are not doing that in your actions, they notice that, and they see if you're demonstrating a fear towards people of color. They notice that and they witness it. And especially here in Valdez, if your children are growing up in a mostly predominantly white neighborhood and you don't immerse them alongside people of color, children notice that. They notice your body language and they listen to what is being said around them. So that's what makes it really even more important to have this conversation very clearly with kids. And if you're feeling nervous about having a conversation with your child, it's really great to just practice with another adult that you trust before talking with your kids, because the more comfortable you feel talking about this, the more comfortable they're going to feel talking about it. They notice your behavior, they notice your nervousness. And so it's really important to for yourself to get comfortable addressing this. And just as hard as it is to talk with your kids, don't avoid this topic. When you brush off topics like racism with your child, you could be dismissing real fears and real questions that they have, and you could be accidentally reinforcing negative stereotypes that you don't want to pass on. But by not talking about it, we lose out on any sort of form of change. And not only is it not okay, or not only is it okay and good to allow your kid to see you struggling with issues around this, it can be really profound to show that you too are upset about what's happening around race in our country. This normalizes the impact and emotions around social justice movements and helps them see that, yes, it is wrong and it's not okay, and we can just stick in that feeling, that icky feeling, in order to change something. So if we can't teach coping skills if we just show them the shiny part of our lives. So we need to teach them how to cope by showing them how we cope. And so give yourself space to be imperfect in this conversation, because that makes it possible for them to say, oh, I can be imperfect in this conversation. And we're all just trying to be better human beings. So this is just a start. This is just the beginning. And we gave you a lot of great tools, and we hope that you can use them, because we're all just trying to muddle through this. And when we try, we're doing the hard thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And don't let your fear of perfectionism and doing everything correctly, don't let that stop you from doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Molly, for
Yes.
sharing your expertise.
Yes, thank you, Kaitlin. This is a very positive discussion, and thank you for asking me to be a part of it.
All right. Bye, folks.
Bye, friends. Thank